Hey everybody, it's Kelly from ZinnyMe, and today we're recording a podcast live. Typically we record podcasts and then we put them on, to be listened to later. But because of the urgency of what's going on right now in the Ukraine and the war, we felt it'd be really good to do this live so you don't have to wait for editing and production and all of that. But you can catch a replay of this on our podcast. Today, I am joined by Dr. Polina, who is a psychologist in Colorado and who has graciously offered to talk about this issue and how it's going to show up in our practices, what we can do, what we can expect when traumatic things in the world are happening that really do impact the people that we work with. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Do you want to share
I was dreaming about it. This is not the occasion I was dreaming on, but
well, we'll have you back on for a different occasion
yes,
as well.
I hope so.
Do you want to share a little bit about your practice and why this topic is near and dear to you as well?
So yes, my practice is in Denver. So it's my office in Denver, Colorado. And I'm originally from Russia, and I moved here in the US like 8 years ago. And I started my practice, oh gosh, now it's 4 years already. Mm-hmm. So it's almost 4 years ago. And I was a psychologist all my life, and it took me a while to prove my education and all this stuff. And that happened that Colorado has like big Russian-speaking community. And my family, my mom and my brother moved here even before in 1997. And right now I belong to the like Russian girls, so, everybody belongs to some girl group. And our group is like 2,600 people in Colorado, and it's really active. And it's a big active community, and I still keep friends and connections with my colleagues in Russia and Ukraine. And we have a Balin group, support group, which consists of Russian and Ukrainian psychologists, therapists, and coaches. And we used to meet like every other week. And now, like, wow, where is so everybody's shaking, everybody in super tense. It's all horrible. I was shaking as well about 3 weeks, and now I'm kind of ready to help. I'm kind of back in, so I'm ready to help those who are still shaking.
Yes, and the reason this topic came up is Polina is in one of our communities. She's a business schooler, and she's in our TAP program, and I reached out to her just to check on how she was doing, because I know this impacts her family and her colleagues as well. And we were talking about a way we could collaborate and get the word out as a way, because Polina's deep heart is to serve. And we want to do it without burning you out, and also understanding that this is also trauma for you, and wanted to be sure you were ready to share it. And you reached out and you're like, okay, I'm ready. So you want to talk a little bit, just kind of like, why even this topic? We're in the US. What does it matter? I think it does, but you want to give some more background in terms of information for how it's showing up in therapy work in our life.
Yes, and I wish it would not, it will be like far away than in our backyard, but now I can see in my practice, it's not just Russian-speaking clients who are traumatized, but just normal American-speaking clients, Latino clients, everybody who have any kind of traumatic experience in the past. Mm-hmm. And especially because Russia still have nuclear power and it's threatening the world. And unfortunately, everybody understands that US is going to be the first target if the worst happening. And it's easy to relate because first, it's Europe, it's European country. It's people like we, like totally, like it's so easy to relate. And second, when I Googled it and have found that about 5 million Russian-speaking citizens in US, and this includes all Russian-speaking, includes lot of people from Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Jewish community from the whole Soviet Union, Kazakhstan, and the whole like post-Soviet Union area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big chance that it will show up in any of our practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you? I know you had sent me some information, just on the similarity in culture, those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's it's maybe it's not that like, because right now for the world, okay, this is like feels like totally separate country, like Russia invade Ukraine, and yes, it is. It's invasion, it's aggression, it's a war, and at the same time, why it's why it's worse than ever, because Russia, especially Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, was like have very similar culture, very similar cuisine, very similar language. It still have its own culture, each of them, but it was like they belonged to one country for like centuries, and they were all together in like Russian Empire. It was all together in the Soviet Union, and even in Soviet Union, the whole last it was like Slavic part of Soviet Union and Russian Empire. There was like Caucasus republics, and there was some Tatar, and they are more Muslims. This is all like Christian, similar language, similar, like a lot of interconnections between families, friends. It's just literally was one family. So that feels like a war inside the family. And that's why it's more hurtful for the whole family hurts, of course. And apparently, if you remember, like I hardly remember, like a couple years ago was a lot of protests in Belarus because they tried to change their leader. They failed, but it was a lot of protests, and many people flee from Belarus to Ukraine and to Poland. And so now all these Belarusian refugees have to flee again, and we're talking about thousands of people. So, and it's just one big mess. It's one big mess there. And now like part of the same family hate each other with very good reason. And it's a mess here, even like in we can see like many of in my social media, like there was no much hatred, because I have specific audience, like mostly mental health professionals, and but many people can see like people divided. So some people, okay, even some of them don't support much war, but they support Russia and they watch Russian TV still here, and especially like we talk about older generations. And obviously Ukrainian who have relatives in the war zone, and there is a lot of tension here between like inside the community as well. So that means there's tension right now. We can see the erasing the common humanity as well. And so, but about when we talk about trauma, is like people who work with trauma now everyday basis. Right now, we can see like all kind of different traumas.
So, can you talk more about what we can expect in the U.S. in our private practices? What kinds of things?
So what we can expect in US, what I can see, like we can expect that people who like direct war zone trauma, that's people who come, who happen to have open visas, or they have relatives here, and or who come back from the war zone, people who go and support and volunteer on the Poland border, for example. I personally have like people like that. Like, of course, we're going to have like secondary war zone trauma. So people who have relatives in Ukraine, people right now, like people in Russia whose children happen to become a soldier in a war zone suddenly, who like definitely didn't want it. But it's people who I just read today a colleague. She lives in Czech Republic, in Praga, and she discussed how her daughter in a elementary school helping one of the refugees girl who speak only Russian and like help her to adjust. And that's just like when mama asked her like, how was the school? She's like, no bombing, mom, no bombing yet. And that's, I mean, it's like, okay, we're gonna have that like secondary trauma and here and there. And we're gonna have some collective guilt trauma, or like collective trauma with betrayal of trust and friendship. In that, that's a family, it's a family connections. And for people in like my generation, we grew up on Second World War examples when we all stayed together as a Soviet Union against the Nazis and against German Nazis, fascism, and it was all like one country. This is like, and especially Ukraine and Belarus, it was a lot of like Holocaust. It was all occupied by the German, like by the Nazis, and it was a lot of all like Jewish, like thousands of Jewish people were like killed, and people moved all around the country, so that everybody have that memory. It's not just far. It's my grandma. That's like I remember her stories in my childhood very well. Even they were very well adapted, like I understood later. So that's and right now, so all this like, wow, suddenly like we Russians, like I talk about we because I'm originally from Moscow, like what are we aggressors now? So and by the way, that Putin's propaganda calling that we are fighting against Nazis in Ukraine. So that like Nazi words, which like for the people who grew up with like anti-Nazi union, all, by the way, this is bad Americans. They don't accept black people. That we accept everyone. Like we are all equal. No. And right now, this like generation who grew up on these values, suddenly like, wow. Yeah. By the way, like this is not, and smart people understand. Like, no, this is it exactly. We are betraying that values which we grew up on. So that's about collective guilt and totalitarian regime victims from Russia and Belarus, because people right now can get in prison for 15 years when they falsely accuse Russian army. Like, for example, and we already can see that. We can see like victim comparison. So, for example, like Ukrainians let in on Mexican border and Russian are not right now. That's what. And, is okay, my pain is not as your pain and all that. Like, but so hate crimes, that's what we can see. And if you work in or like your clients work in organizations which have like multicultural situation, for example, I directly, like one of my friends talked that like truck drivers are suffering, and they say like trucking company owners say to the Belarusian drivers, say like, I'm not gonna send you because I don't want my truck gonna be burned if you start speak Russian somewhere on the gas station. And that's a hate crime, like we had like Asian hate in the beginning of pandemic, right? That was just it's unreasonable. So now, but now we have for people who have that inner instability and who have tendency to go into the hate. Okay, now let's hate Russians. They are bad guys.
And the U.S. has been there before, as well.
Of course,
It's a long underlying narrative in our fabric.
Yeah, and we, unfortunately, there is that tendencies in the U.S. that let's hate those Like, let's hate like Trump supporters, let's hate anti-vaxxers or like vaxxers or whatever. So that it's a lot of tension which we have already. So if people who have that inner already like anxiety fatigue, whatever, they just tired of all that instability. Oh, now like, wow, this is the perfect enemy.
It does feel like a reawakening, though, of old narratives from when I was a child, even, Cold War and things like that,
yes,
it's burgeoning again.
That's right. And and when, okay, let me just, I finished that about increasing anxiety, helplessness, and tension for like any kind of people who already have that. For example, I have a friend who were in a war zone in his childhood in Serbia. Now he's experiencing his PTSD, like again, symptoms. And we have like a lot of people. So it's any like new trauma exposure, even like TV can do it. You know that TV can do it. So, and that prolonged observation to the like violence and suffering can provoke all kind of relationship issues. So, for example, like I have a person who work with domestic violence, and she was a victim in domestic violence herself, and now she's advocating for that. And she's like, look, now all that people who had the tendencies like feel kind of like unspoken permission, like, yeah, of course, this is should be my way or no way. And you, by the way, should listen. So, and that's, she really like, she is feeling that it's kind of permission to any kind of violence. And yeah, that's, I was talking to people, to my clients like last several days, and I was like, what are you feeling? What are your main feelings? And I can say the main feelings is anger. Eventually it's like, I'm upset, and after I'm kind of mad, and I'm really angry. What are you doing? So it's like suddenly we have several millions more angry people in the world. Guess what good it can do? It's kind of, so this is our job to clean it up.
And what has it been like for you these past few weeks, being from Moscow, sitting with clients?
For me, it was actually really good, refreshing experience of adjustment disorder. So I just really feel that's how adjustment disorder in the best case scenario feels like. You feel like suddenly it's a bomb, but it means it's not a bomb in my backyard, but it's like it was really, and people are fleeing, and people are, means it was after it was like mostly like freeze reaction for me. And I can't stop scrolling the news. I was sitting on the news and Facebook, and like last 3 weeks more than I did last 3 years, like literally. So, and it at some moment it was like that helplessness and fear, and in my case, because I prone to freeze reaction, and for me it's mostly like dystemic reaction, and like at some moment I feel like I'm just drained, my energy was drained, so like no energy at all. And after I reached out for help, and that's why, by the way, like that like damn, and like reach out for help for close people, and after like all my close people traumatize themselves, I reach out to my TAP community, and that was actually the turning point for me, when the people who I decided, okay, I do need help from people who not that much of involved, who don't have relatives there, who don't have friends there, who don't have colleagues. So, and that was the turning point for me, and it's a moment it helped me to cry, and start my way back. So kind of, and I can start to feel like a little bit more energy every day, and I can speak now.
Yeah, I think for those of you who are listening, in this community that we have, Polina, I encouraged her to just make a video of what she was going through, because when I had reached out to her, it was in the earlier few weeks ago. And so she just posted like what she was going through. And then other people in the community posted video responses and written responses and offered like to talk to each other on the phone or whatever they needed to be able to get support. And I think there is something about you as a clinician, for anyone that's listening that's a clinician in private practice, it's really tracking. If you hear Polina talk about, I know what response I'm having, I have a freeze response, and finding, navigating those parts to get needs met by others. So relying on other community members helped kind of find some releases, because there was a moment where you're like, I haven't cried, I haven't been able to express it, because you've been frozen, and so you started to melt a little bit through that. What can we do as just human beings, but also as clinicians in private practice, when we are seeing these trauma responses, when we are seeing the victim comparison, the collective guilt trauma, the hate crimes, discrimination, maybe even our clients increasing in symptoms and just how they're coping with information, because a lot of our clients may be touched by this or re-traumatized through something similar from their own family of origin and history.
So yeah, when I wrote that kind of like list, and the first thing which I was talking, that the main thing is to prevent dehumanization right now. And I really suggest, I watched a couple days ago the movie which called Oslo, and it's about the negotiation between Palestinian and Israel in 90s, which happened on a back channel in Norway. It was two couples who facilitated through that first stage. And it was like impossible negotiation at the time, and they helped them come to that. And that totally, that to start talking, and that people like in this movie, that Palestinian and Israel representatives like suddenly say like, this is my first Jew I shake hand with. And that this seat and that little guest house in Norway, and say like, you talk, and that we all sit and share meals, and we talk about families in the evening, and eventually that they become humans toward each other. And that's for people to help stay humans toward each other, even like toward people who doing total. Yes, it doesn't mean that let's like be permissive to the aggression
behavior.
Yeah, it's but like prevent dehumanization when it's possible, especially when it's direct trauma.
What does that look like? Can I just ask what that looks like in a session? And maybe that's too big of a question to dive into today, but I think.
Yes, no, that's you're totally right, because like when I talk like to another like colleague, and it's like, how you can imagine it's in a session, person is totally like in grieving, can say that they kill my brother or whatever, and they say, okay, this is horrible what you're feeling, and it's your choice if you continue this violence or you choose to leave and help stop the violence and support the structure which like can stop the violence. But you not go into that, just he killed me, I'm gonna kill him, and let's continue that how we call blood revenge, like what's the word for that?
That makes sense what you're saying. I don't know any other word for it.
Yeah, that's and even for especially for people with more like Caucasian roots, Arabic roots, that's a very like they grew up with this concept like like revenge. You need to like blood for blood, and for people with yes, it's uh, s- to stop the violence doesn't mean to kill, and sometimes stop the violence means like uh, oh, sorry.
Almost sounds like it
Yeah,
means like stopping it within yourself first.
stopping it in yourself, in your family,
Mm-hmm.
in your clothes, in any relationship around you.
Mm-hmm.
Be firm doesn't mean to be aggressive.
Right. And I think that's where you were talking about also that like not supporting a designated enemy approach in session or zero-sum game is what you had mentioned.
Yes, and that's and it's hard because
Mm-hmm.
it's hard even for the smart people who understand what zero sum game means.
Mm-hmm.
For people who like how what else. So and okay, and it was hanging on the side of my brain that so similar situation, like you have a couple counseling and for example like one spouse saying I'm sober for 3 months, why you are still mad at me?
Mm-hmm.
Like just forget and forgive, and just let's start now and be clear and be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Another partner saying I don't have amnesia, I can't, I would like to but I can't. So and exactly what we do with the couples, we say okay, we do both. Is it tricky? Yes, but everybody who works with couples and families know that it's possible. Yeah, to grow trust bite by bite, and help to process and help the part who is responsible for violence or for
Mm-hmm.
hurt
Right.
take responsibility and work with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it comes to me, like I've been there, I know this is that hard, it is hard, it's possible, it is possible.
Mm-hmm. I think too the other part that you had brought up when we were talking was just about how to respect your clients' boundaries, especially those that are hurting, but also be really curious and open-minded because we're all bringing bias in. You can't tell me that you don't show up in the room, and our biases are there. Our own feelings about what's going on is there and showing up as well.
Mhm.
And so having that place of curiosity is true work of the therapist and artistry, I think, in some ways, of constantly being aware of your own parts that are coming up and still leaving room to be curious about the impact on the client while helping them navigate their own biases.
Yeah, that totally, like as in IFS training, like to be aware of my own parts, that's
Yes.
always a trick. And uh okay, I can share like my own another personal experience. Somebody know here that I was married the person who came out as a transgender,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a shock for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I never deal with transgender before, and I was not homophobic over or something, but it was very different, and
Mm-hmm.
it took me good chunk of work to understand and accept and stay friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible to work with our parts which are like totally don't want to accept that,
Mm-hmm.
and want to side with somebody, even like we know that we trained to be tolerant and open-minded, but it's
Mm-hmm.
easy say than do.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that's why that peer support and supervision groups and communities are like, I think, like essential. It's just
Mm-hmm.
I would not survive without my communities.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
One of the other things that I really loved is how you were talking about just as human beings, what do it mean to be supportive? And you were saying like play Tchaikovsky, eat a pierogi, like support Russian speaking friends and business owners. And can you talk more about that?
Yeah, that's um, uh, that's easy. Like maybe it's, I mean, it's a little bit too much, a little bit too more work, too more like, let's ask questions first. Like if it's a Russian speaking person in your environment, you can ask like, where you came from, what is your position? So, and how can I support you? And that's just be curious. And if the person for some reason like support this war and like well, like under Putin's propaganda, you can try to discuss it, or you can just like, okay, step back. If a person is like openly you feel that you share their position, so just show that like common humanity and curiosity. And especially for people who are there, like let them work. Most of us, like Russian speaking, like Russian, Ukrainian, Belarus, like there are a lot of artists, web designers who can be overseas and still need need customers. Just yeah, it's almost impossible to buy anything from Russia now, but at some moment. So if there are like Russian speaking cleaners or mechanics or pastry shop, just go and say like, I know that we all want peace. Let's be at peace. Let's be good neighbors. All people who moved here, they moved for a reason. They moved to build. They are Americans right now. We are Americans, and we try to keep our culture, somebody more, somebody less, as like any kind of communities. And but the being Americans, it means like work, build our own businesses, grow children, like volunteer. So just be humans.
I think I remember, I'm just going to say for me, when I reached out to you, there's a part of me that does feel like, I'm aware of the white saviorism and not wanting to be this American hero, kind of like stepping in, but really just more of a concern for who you are and knowing that you have family and colleagues who are in a country where maybe they do or do not agree with what Putin is doing. And it's directly impacting you, and just saying, hey, curious, is there anything that we can do? Because it is impacting, like it could also impact your business, in terms of, luckily you have clients who are not that way, but not everybody has that, or they may have clients who there's, hate and things spread around. And so it's this fine line, right? And it's just like, hey, I'm just caring about you as a person who knows you, who loves you, who wants what's best for you. And I don't know where you stand on anything, but just knowing that there's a big connection there. So I think it's important that we also look at our motive in terms of why we're doing what we're doing, and that it's really, again, curiosity, not saying I have the answers and I know how to help. Instead saying, you tell me, like, is there something that I can do, any of my resources that can be used to support you? And I think as colleagues, especially with the re-traumatization piece of us as therapists, are we reaching out to each other saying, like, I've been traumatized, like a lot of my clients are impacted by this, I need support? That's one of the ways that we can just see the humanness of being a therapist, carrying this kind of pain, where we're being re-traumatized as well, especially some clinicians who have been through war, who have been through immigration. And there's a lot of layers here of how do we care for each other and as human beings, and say, how can I help? These are the resources I have at my disposal. I'm happy to consult. I'm happy to chat. I'm happy to just have a cup of tea with you and let you cry, whatever it may be. It's important.
Yes, and please do it. Please reach out, because when Kelly reached out, I was in a state of grief, which I didn't have any resources to reach out to even like what I have.
Yeah.
So, and we don't know everybody like adjusting differently. So
Yes.
please do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I just want to say I appreciate you sharing your own process and where you're at, how you've been melting from your freeze mode and things like that. But also, we've been having discussions about what does it mean to take care of yourself in the midst of this. And this was one of those acts of self-care too, of like giving voice to your story, of being heard. I hope that also has kind of helped you feel, like
Yes. Yes. And I still like, okay, I still like want to say that, because I told it to like many of my clients. That's it's a part of post-traumatic growth. Like, to clean up and really take care of our relationships is important.
Mhm.
It's an ongoing process, and that's what happened between Russia and Ukraine. They have some like submerging like coals in the backyard. And it's like, guess what's happened if you have coals in the backyard?
You're gonna have a
It's
fire eventually.
yes, or like another like somebody just provoked this fire. Yes, that's and if we're lucky, we can have it for years. And you, like, each of you who work with couples can hear that, like, oh, how long? And this was like for years. Like, oh my God, how you people can live like this for years with this like pain of like, what's it, temperature like a little bit above normal, but it's draining you all the time.
Right, but we tolerate it. Yeah.
That's right. So, and that's awakening, like what I'm standing for as a human being in my relationships, and take actions. And yeah, go volunteer. Like, one of my friend in California yesterday talked to me, like, I worked for hours like sorting the humanitarian aid, and I finally feel well and sleep well in 3 weeks. So, and that's maybe just go and do something. And but for me, to work with relationships and take care of relationships, like, kind of wake up, this is my calling, that's what I do in my work, and that's what I want to do in my life. And please take care of each other. Let's take care of each other.
Yeah, I hear that. I really love that piece about how the post-traumatic growth is taking what do I want, how do I want to affect change from what has happened that's been out of my control. And that comes at the human level, the relational level, and even at a professional level of, I as a parent, what do I want to teach my child? What do I want in my relationships and how I have these conversations? And then also as a clinician, how do I help heal these parts and with others and who I work with, and how I handle this, of being aware of the biases, being aware of racism and all the different parts and the trauma that can come up with it, and being intentional about doing that work. But for some of us, even just volunteering can, like you said, can help you feel like this is what I'm doing about it, and that can be really calming for the nervous system when you're in a traumatized state.
Yeah, that's what, like, right now we are talking about that. That's our part. This is
Yeah. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. I sprung this on you to do it live. We typically, like I said, don't do the podcast live, but I just felt like it's a conversation that's really relevant to today and needed to be had today. Polina, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to find you?
I'm pretty unique, so you can just type Polina Koda psychologist and you'll find me.
Yes.
So, and the name of my practice is Your Wave Counseling, and you'll have links to that.
Yes, we'll have that on the podcast notes when we post
and
that.
just just send the notes through the site, or just send me at Polina at yourwavecounseling.com, and I will be happy to talk.
Yes. So
It's
think
you.
about, for clinicians out there watching or listening to this later, think about who you know, how you can reach out, how you can, manage your own stress during this time, but also that with your clients and people in your own life. Polina, thank you for everything you had to share. I'm so grateful for you. And yeah.
Thank you,
That's all from me.
Kelly.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you all till next time. Stay